My name is Stephen Brueggerhoff, horticulturist with Brazoria County AgriLife Extension in Angleton, Texas. The Extension's mission is to provide educational programs, best practices of gardening and horticulture that are science-based from the university itself. We're offering programs that are going to make a difference in people's lives. I've been in this game for about 3 years. I've been the county horticulturist in Brazoria County for 3 years, and it's a pleasure to serve the community and serve you with information about gardening. This past Tuesday, we had a program where I was talking about composting. Today, we're talking about heirloom tomatoes. So I'll talk a little bit about heirloom tomatoes. I'll also let you know some of other types of tomatoes that you can grow, especially during the heat of our summer. A little bit of information that'll help you be successful with gardening with tomatoes. Now, this program is sponsored by Keep Pearland Beautiful. Keep Pearland Beautiful is an organization devoted to bettering the people's lives in the city of Pearland, and they do make a positive effect on people in the region and in the county as well. We've been providing gardening programming through a lecture series called the Keep Pearland Beautiful Garden Lecture Series. They were physical programs, but of course with the pandemic, we're doing this live through a broadcast. We had one last month. This month we have another one with heirloom tomatoes. Next month it'll be another one, so just stay tuned and log on to my website to find more information about that program. So Keep Pearland Beautiful, great organization. We've been partnered with them providing these lectures for the past, I guess it's been close to 10 years now, quite a while. And we're very, very happy to have them as a partner. I'm broadcasting from, I like to call it my garden, but it's not quite my garden. I participate in the Pearland Community Garden, which is sponsored also by Keep Pearland Beautiful in the city of Pearland as well. The Pearland Community Garden has been in the ground for, probably just as long, 7 to 8 years at least, if not more. And my wife and I have had the pleasure of being out here at the community garden for the past 3 years and loving every bit of it. I've got some tomatoes growing in my plot as well. I won't show that to you tonight, but I would like to show you in a little bit some of the production beds that we have. Production beds are we're growing vegetables out of that through some of the co-managers that are helping with guiding the community garden. Both the Imons, Ruth and August Imon, are in our audience today. So I've got a little bit of an audience, safe distancing, but masks on. And they help to provide that service for the community and for the community from the community garden as well. I believe, if I remember correctly, the last harvest, the tomatoes are just starting to come on. They're getting really nice and ripe, and they were able to harvest about 14 pounds, I believe. So they're harvesting them a little green, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but about 14 pounds. They're finally to the point where they can deliver them to a local charity organization. I believe the organization is called Mary Queen Catholic Church here in the area in Pearland. We're very, very happy to be able to provide produce to those folks that need that resource as well. If you do have a community garden in your area where you're located, or possibly a food bank where you can donate produce, please go ahead and do it. Our community could really use that resource, especially now. So, without further ado, I'll talk a little bit about some of these plants. Now, I know a lot of the folks that are watching this evening maybe you're an avid vegetable grower. You might think you have a brown thumb. I like to say that brown is a color too. So, even if you don't think you have the skills or the chops, it is, don't worry about it. I shouldn't say don't worry about it. What I mean to say is don't lose faith, because you can be a successful gardener. We do have a group, the chapter of the Texas Master Gardener Program, Brazoria County Master Gardeners Association, are here to help you, myself. It's a large county, but we rely on those volunteers to help promote programs and help to educate people. For those folks who think they have a brown thumb, to help you be a successful gardener, to get you into the green thumb arena, right? So, I've been gardening for quite a long time in different ornamental gardening as well as vegetable gardening. And I feel like I'm a very successful tomato gardener now. I want to show you some of my friends, some of the tomatoes that we've been able to grow. But anyway, I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'll stop just for a minute and let y'all know that since I'm running this solo, I do have some friends here to watch me to make sure I don't faint in the sun. But other than that, I am running this solo. So if you do have a question, please feel free to post it on this when you're logged in, and I will answer it after the program. So don't have somebody answering those questions, but I'll be more than happy to share time with you after the program. So let's say that you're starting off with tomato gardening. Do you put in the plants now? Well, that's kind of a loaded question. It depends on the variety. If you're starting gardening from scratch, of course, the best time to start your garden is to prepare your garden sometime in the late winter months. Maybe you would prepare a garden, a future garden. If you have a place where you've never developed a garden, it's best to start at least a good 5 to 6 months ahead of time so that you can get a head start, a timely start when you're ready to start working with vegetables, spring vegetables like tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, etc. So you want to start that ahead of time. You all know, if you're in Brazoria County or maybe in the Houston area or down towards Brazoria, other areas surrounding the Houston Metroplex, Galveston, etc., you know our soil types are heavy in clay. Now it's kind of counterintuitive. We think we can grow azaleas here. There are some varieties that you can grow, but the soil pH, the pH value of the soil is not low enough to grow a plant like that. Since we do have a lot of clay, you would think that we would have a lower pH, but we don't. Our soil pH here is anywhere between 6 to 6.5. So getting up towards a balance, or more, I like to say more alkaline. It's not true alkaline, but it's perfect for tomatoes, our native soil. But because our native soil is a little challenging, I do recommend to folks to go ahead and build a raised bed or build a row for vegetable gardening. The reason for that, tomatoes like this wonderful tomato, to have these grow, they need soil that's rich in organic matter, and it needs to be a well-draining soil as well. So I do recommend to build up in a raised bed or possibly in a row. You know, if you've ever gone out to commercial vegetable production, a lot of times those rows are built up around 6 to 8 inches, and there's a reason for that. They need to lift those plants up to get them adequate water. They need to enrich the soil just like you do at home. And we don't want these plants sitting in water. The roots will rot out, so go ahead and just build that up. So the soil types here are, the native soils are good for growing in the ground if you can get a spot with well-draining soil. If you're working in soil that you've built a raised bed in, then that's probably even better. You're off on a better start that way. When you're preparing the bed, you're going to want to fertilize that plot ahead of time. So I read an article by Dr. Joe Masabny. Dr. Masabny is a specialist, vegetable specialist up in Overton. Overton is up near Tyler, Texas. And he has some wonderful demonstration gardens up there. He's very, very knowledgeable about what he's doing up there. But Dr. Masabny recommends to put about 2 to 3 pounds of a balanced fertilizer for every 100 square feet. So we all know from grade school math, that's a 10 foot by 10 foot plot, right? So about 2 to 3 pounds in an approximate area. What does that mean in a row? You do the math. I'm just letting you know what's recommended for that. So prepare your bed, add adequate fertilization to it. Make sure you've got some well-composted material that you've mixed into that bed. Either you're working from scratch. If you're working directly in the soil, you're going to want to build that up and add some composted organic matter to that. Let it settle a bit, and then plan on planting. One of the magic questions on raising tomatoes is when can you expect to harvest? Most of the, if you have a packet of seeds, they'll often, the company that's producing that seed packet will have information on that seed packet of when to anticipate your first harvest. In general, with tomatoes, you can anticipate mostly 70 to 85 days for most tomatoes. There are some exceptions to that. The larger the tomato, this kind of goes, just thinking about it, the larger the tomato, the longer time you're going to need to let it sit on the vine or on the plant to be able to reach maturity. Now you can harvest them a little bit green and they will ripen on your countertop. And we do that here at the community garden for several reasons, but one primary reason are some of the insects or animals that like to eat those plants, right? So you have a wonderful, I'll get to the heirloom tomatoes in just a moment, but you have a wonderful tomato like this. I'm not sure if you can see that too well. Just to give you scale, I'm 6'4". I'm more than average. I'm a more than average person. And so you can kind of imagine how big this tomato is. I'd say it's about maybe 5 inches in diameter. This would be almost a beefsteak tomato, right? Looks beautiful up from your vantage point. And when I went to pluck this from the garden, it started blushing. It looks perfect for this variety. This variety is called Galahad. This is a hybrid. It's not an heirloom tomato. But I'm just demonstrating why we pluck them a little green. Because some critter got on this tomato and started chopping down on it. I found another one today, same thing. The tomato started looking perfect. It was the perfect size, the perfect weight. The weight of this tomato is about a pound, believe it or not. So it's not as big as some tomatoes can get, and it's all water weight, but it's a beautiful shape. It's got the perfect color for the kind of variety it is. Unfortunately, an animal got into it. We may not be able to salvage this. If I fry it up I might be able to, but I don't know what animal got onto this, so I certainly don't want to eat those parts. But we pick them a little bit green to keep some of the critters away from it. Critters meaning insects as well. Dear viewer, you may be familiar with a particular insect that we often call a stink bug, right? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you know, yeah. So stink bugs, they go by another name. They're called the leaf-footed bug as well. If you ever have, my dad has a name for the one that was in his home. If my dad's watching, you know what I'm talking about. So he had a pet of one of these guys over the winter. But when they get to be an adult size, there's not many insecticides that you can do to combat those bugs. So look it up on your own time, right? But some of you may know what I'm talking about when I say stink bug. They're gray colored. They look almost triangular in shape, kind of shield shaped on the top. And when they get to that adult stage, when you see them, there's not much you can do other than vacuum them off, right? Or hand pick them and squish them. If you've had a tough day at the office, just go ahead and squish them and there you go. All my stress is relieved. So there's not much you can do for that when they get to be that size, when they get to be an adult. And we do pick them a little bit green as well to combat that. We also grow them out a little bit early. Doesn't matter if they're an heirloom variety or a hybrid like Galahad. We try to grow them out a little bit early, get them in the ground a little bit early to combat or beat the leaf-footed bugs from infesting the plants. The leaf-footed bugs have this long, we call it a proboscis. It's a mouth part, right? Think of a soda straw. Or those juice drinks that you give your kids or your grandkids, and it's got a straw with a little sharp point on the end. That straw with the sharp point in the end is very much like a stink bug or leaf-footed bug proboscis or mouth part. They just stick their little mouth part in there and they start sucking out the nectar, not the nectar, but the sap, the juices of the inside of the tomato, and unfortunately they can cause major damage to the tomato. They make it look unsightly. Little hard spots start to form around where the leaf-footed bug has put its proboscis in the tomato, and sometimes it just makes the tomatoes unpalatable. They get a little bit bitter, so we're trying to beat those critters as well. So yeah, that's pretty much why we try to grow them a little bit early. For that one, that's one of the reasons. We also try to harvest them when they're just slightly green, maybe blushing a little bit, because once other animals recognize that color like we do, more than likely, if it finds one, it's going to say, oh, I remember the grocery store, and come right back in and eat another one. So try to harvest them when you feel comfortable doing that in your capacity. For our folks, our managers, they actually harvested them a little bit green to get them to ripen inside, to prevent any of that happening, so that we'd have these beautiful tomatoes to donate to the Catholic Church and the food bank that they have. All right, so that's enough of that. For Galahad, this is what Galahad looks like on the inside. I'm going to try to, I should eat it, yeah. I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's a wonderful beefsteak tomato. It's got beautiful color on it, kind of pinkish on the inside. I'm sure it's going to taste wonderful. We're going to eat this up tonight, maybe put it on a pizza. That would be better, or maybe even fresh. But let's get to the heirloom tomatoes. I know you're interested in that topic. Heirloom tomatoes, how would you define an heirloom tomato? Well, so it's a moving target. It's almost like saying, how do you define a native plant? Everybody has their own version of what that is. I kind of want to stick with one thing, right? So heirloom tomato, Stephen B., your horticulturist, says that an heirloom tomato, and by consensus from other sources that I looked up, we look at an heirloom tomato that has been bred prior to World War II, prior to the 1940s, right? So commercial heirloom tomatoes are open pollinated, often open pollinated. They're typically recognized as an heirloom tomato if they were produced before 1940, or they have about 50 years, right, on them that they were commercially available. So like I just said, that's a moving target, right? 10 years from now, 50 years is, you know, there you go. So we'll go with that 1940s version and stick to that until I'm disproven, then we'll try something else. If we're talking about family heirlooms, right? So commercial heirlooms prior to a certain time in our lifetimes, or maybe our parents' or grandparents' lifetimes. Family heirlooms, just think of them as pass-along plants. These are seeds that were saved from maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents, or a cousin or a relative, and then passed along. So, you know, think of it that way. Then there are some that are created, right? Those are oftentimes, they can be an heirloom variety like German Johnson that is then hybridized with another heirloom, or possibly even hybridized with a hybrid like Galahad. This is the green version of Galahad, kind of pear-shaped. And then, you know, successive populations are bred out, seeds are trialed out until until the desired characteristics are bred back into it. Right? There's a whole science behind this Mendelian genetics that are going on. Cool. So anyway, just to give you a little hint as to what we're doing here. Now, heirloom tomatoes. I do have a list of heirloom tomatoes, but I also have some wonderful pictures. I haven't grown out too many. There's a few that we've grown out. This one is called, the one that I just showed you is German Johnson, but I'll revisit that in a moment. Also, if the words in these pictures look backwards to you, then I made a mistake, but I think they should look forwards for you. So there's some heirloom varieties right there. I'll bend down. 6'4", I gotta bend down for this. If you're thinking of a paste tomato, there's one called Amish paste. This particular variety will produce a pear-shaped paste tomato, about 7 ounces. So how many ounces in a pound, dear viewers? 16 ounces in a pound. Kind of go backwards from there. So I'd say that this one's probably about 5 to 6 inches long if it gets the right, you know, if it has everything it needs, adequate water, fertilization, etc. Beautiful little tomato as far as an heirloom variety that will work in our hot and humid climate here around Houston, in Pearland, Brazoria, anywhere within our county. There's another one that one of my master gardeners, had grown out, and I did not have a chance to get to grow out. I planted them too late last year. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to specifically get this variety because I'm interested in it. It's more of a popular variety. It's called Arkansas Traveler. Arkansas Traveler produces, moderate-sized tomato. The interesting thing about this particular heirloom variety is it retains pinkish color. It's not as deep red as, say, like a Better Boy or some of the more popular hybrids. I like a little bit of variety in the tomato fruits that I have, and Arkansas Traveler seems to have that quality to it. So it's pink. Another cool thing about Arkansas Traveler is it's non-acidic. So some people want a tomato that tastes like a tomato, you know. I like that acidity. But there's some of us, like me, that, I like a little bit non-acidic. Arkansas Traveler might be a good variety for you to try out, and you can be successful growing a plant like this in our area. Now, one particular variety that I think is interesting is it's retaining some of those wild qualities of some of the native tomatoes. So you may have heard that tomatoes themselves, as far as it is a global fruit, and tomatoes were actually discovered, not discovered, well, when the Europeans came and started colonizing, and found those particular wonderful foods and started spreading them globally. Tomatoes originally came from the Andes, an Andes area in South America. And so some of these wild tomatoes have this marvelous coloring. Now this is not a native tomato, this is another hybrid, but you can see this dark coloring on it. Those are anthocyanins that's a chemical that's coloration that's being expressed through this fruit. There are some new heirlooms, right, hybrids, that have been back crossed, maybe with some original genetics from that area, and so this black color is brought out in some of these newer hybrids. Well, Black Krim at some point, I'm sure it was a hybrid prior to 1940, and the cool thing about Black Krim is it retains some of that, what we call black shouldering, kind of dark purple shouldering on it. I just think that's outstanding. Now, Black Krim is about a half a pound. Remember, dear viewer, a full pound is 16 ounces. So, that's about 8 ounces, right? Pick up a can of tomatoes, you probably have 8 ounces to compare that with. So Black Krim produces a nice, smooth fruit to it. It has those wonderful black shoulders to it, and it has an outstanding taste to it. Now, it is considered to be a maroon. Well, it is a maroon color, but it also happens to be a beefsteak, considered to be a beefsteak tomato. Very similar in shape and size to the Galahad that I showed y'all not too long ago. Let me show you again what a beefsteak, the perfect beefsteak looks like when it's sliced open. This is not a Black Krim, this is Galahad. I'm just demonstrating that this is what we're looking for in a beefsteak tomato. Nice, big, right, smooth, easy to slice, etc. Black Krim was actually developed it's considered to have come from Russia. I haven't looked that up to see if there's any truth to that, but I'm letting you know, dear viewer, go ahead and prove the experts wrong, and then do a little bit of research and see if you can find some more information on that. All right. There's one particular variety of tomato, another beefsteak type tomato that I haven't had any luck growing here, but I'm not asking you not to grow it, and I'm not saying don't grow it. Please try to grow it out. I just haven't had any luck. Here, I had more luck in Central Texas with this particular variety, and it's called Cherokee Purple. Cherokee Purple, this picture doesn't do it justice. It's another beefsteak type tomato. It does have a thinner skin. So Galahad, that means you can insult it and it'll be insulted easily. Anyway, Galahad, it's so heavy, I think, because it has a thicker skin and it's retaining a lot more water. Cherokee Purple, you can get a fruit that's almost 2 pounds with these guys. They will take a while to mature on the vine or on the plant, but they're outstanding. They're not as acidic as some plants are. They slice really nicely. This one was believed to have been developed about 1890. So 1890, folks, and they get really big. Great taste. They are thin-skinned, though. And where I haven't had much success, I offer to you and challenge you to go ahead and try to grow these. Now, I'll stop really quickly just for a moment and kind of get back where you can see me and I don't have to bend down so much. So, when do you start your tomatoes? Well, we started ours by seed in a protected area indoors within the first couple of weeks of January of this year, because we knew that we were going to plant them out about mid-March here in Pearland, in Friendswood, in Angleton, right, which is where we have a demonstration plot with some varieties that I'll recommend to you as well. We have a tomato trial at our demonstration gardens down in Angleton. The demonstration gardens are called the Brazoria Environmental Education Station. We affectionately call it bees, like the buzzing bee, right? Master Gardeners, we just love that place. We haven't been able to get back to it, but we're hoping to get back to it soon, that we'll be able to open it up for work parties, etc. But I do have tomato trials going on down there, and I'll tell you all the ones that we're growing and doing really, really well with as well. So we started ours in a greenhouse setting. You can start yours indoors in a garage or someplace where you can get bottom heat. The important thing about raising tomatoes from seed, they will germinate, and they'll germinate pretty quickly if you can get the soil temperature up above, I think it's 60 to 65, would you say? That's right? Yeah. We were surprised this year. I keep looking over here, I'm looking at my friends. So we were surprised this year at how quickly they germinated. We had the temperature set at 70 degrees on a rheostat, some cables up underneath a propagation table, heating cables that were buried in sand, and we had that set about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And we had germination within a week. It was amazing to us. We're like, oh my goodness. Okay, now we're overly successful. We got to get these plants to slow down. Anyway, information that I got from Dr. Masabni. Well, I'll tell you that in just a second. I'll tell you that information in just a second. But we started here in the Houston area or Angleton in mid-January, and we did plant them out about mid-March. And right about now, in April, late April, early May is when they're starting to ripen and really mature, and that's why we're going to start harvesting. For most of these varieties, we've got about a month of harvest, and then they're going to stop. Tomatoes typically will stop production once the ambient temperature starts to maintain. I think it's the evening temperature starts to maintain about 70 to 75 degrees. The pollen becomes inviable, right? So it's no longer viable pollen, which is one of the reasons the plants may seem to grow, but they just won't produce fruit. So we're trying to base everything on this target. We're trying to schedule everything out. So if you're trying to raise tomatoes, doesn't matter if they're a hybrid or an heirloom, pay attention to their average date of harvest, 60, 70, 80 days, whatever, and project out. Start planting them and project out from there. So we started about that time. We're getting production exactly when we think we will. This is another variety called German Johnson, and this one we actually have here at the garden at Pearland Community Garden, and we also have this variety at the bees at the demonstration garden down in Angleton. German Johnson's really interesting. It's a large tomato. It's supposed to be a beefsteak. Mine, well, actually it is a beefsteak. Oftentimes when you talk about heirloom tomatoes, sometimes you get tomatoes that are what we call cat-faced. Some tomatoes are hybridized out to reduce this kind of puckering look to them. This is natural for this particular variety. It's still going to taste great. It just, for selling it on a commercial market, commercial growers will oftentimes grow a fruit that we would like to see, right? Smooth skin, great taste, does well in all kind of climates, reliable, money makers for those guys who are growing them, guys and gals who are growing them. These are more specialty plants, but I still value them. I still value the heirloom plants. So oftentimes if you see an heirloom plant, sometimes it'll, they'll have this quality to it. That's not a bad thing, just means you got to cut around some of that puckering. This particular variety, German Johnson, I'll show you in a moment. The ones we have here, they're being watered with more care. The ones out at the demonstration gardens, I need to increase the watering to get the plants bigger, the fruits bigger. So they can get bigger than this one, beautiful one. But German Johnson is a variety that is fairly pink. It retains some of that green coloring on its, what we call its shoulders. They'll get to be about a pound if you let them go. They'll get pretty big, maybe a little bit over that. And they will be, we're expecting them to be very outstanding. We'll donate all of them. We'll keep one or two back, for tasting. We're gonna taste test them, right? That's what we're gonna do. So they should be delicious. So that's just an example of some of the heirloom varieties that you can grow out, that you can be successful with here in our county, here in the great state of confusion. I want to talk a little bit now about the hybrids. So more heirlooms that you can grow. You may have heard some of these others. Go ahead and write this down. Others are, there's a variety called Money Maker. It's an English variety. Produces a smooth fruit, about 5 ounces. The cool thing about Money Maker is it's tolerant of our humidity here in the Gulf Coast. So you might consider a variety like that. Another one that's fairly popular, more beefsteak style, it's called Mortgage Lifter. Mortgage Lifter, that's right, you heard it right, about a pound. Those are just a few more heirloom varieties that you can consider to try. How am I doing on time, by the way? So the program typically would go about 30 to 40 minutes. 30 minutes?
10 more minutes.
Okay, excellent. Typically we'll go about 40 minutes and then I'll stop the program. So thank you all for viewing tonight. Again, for those of you who just dialed in, or I shouldn't say dialed in, that's an old term, right? For those of you who just webbed right in, surfed in, our sponsor tonight is Keep Pearland Beautiful, great organization. We've been working with them. They're a great resource for the community. They help to manage Adrian, the executive director, and his staff, Lenora, other folks that work with another Adrian too, the other Adrian in the office. They manage the recycle center here in Pearland. Great resource for us. I think they're open this coming Saturday. So if you're viewing from Pearland and you do have recycle, pay attention to their website, see what their open hours are. They're slowly starting to open. I believe they're going to have another open day this coming Saturday for your recycle. We prefer it if you, for the Pearland residents. So, just try to keep in mind, we don't want to overpower the folks that are there, but they're here, they're there for us. We're very honored for that. So you may be concerned, you heard me talk a little bit about the heat, certainly that we have down here in Texas, how the tomatoes will stop producing at a certain time of year. There's a seasonality to it. There are some varieties that were hybridized to be heat tolerant. And I'm going to show you some of these right now. Right? So the heat tolerant varieties, typically they're determinate tomatoes. I should have started this off, but I'll explain it now. If you look at some seed packets and you see the information, or a tomato plant and you see information like this tomato is determinate, or this tomato plant is indeterminate. To cut to the quick, determinate means that they'll only grow so high, most of the tomatoes will produce all at once. They'll be mature all at once. There's about a grace period of a couple of weeks, maybe a week or two. Indeterminate means that they have the potential to continue to grow or continue to produce during their season. So most of the heat tolerant varieties are determinate. They produce fairly quickly, 60 to 70 days to maturity. Dr. Joe Masabny says if you're going to plant some varieties that are heat tolerant, try a variety like Mountain Spring. You're going to want to make sure that you back up, about 8 weeks, as you're growing the plant from a seed to a seedling, you're going to want to back up that time to get them in the ground by early June so that you'll get production in August or September. Others that are a little bit later, so you want to put them in the ground as a plant by June, mid to late June or July, are Heat Wave, Sunmaster, Solar Fire, or Solar Set. There's a few other varieties that are heat tolerant. I read that Black Krim is actually a little heat tolerant. I'm not checking into that now. We might try to grow that out next year to see if they actually are. What does that mean? I really don't know until I get those plants in the ground. So we'll be testing some other plants next year for their heat tolerance so we can prepare a little bit better. So Dr. Masabny says, and I'm holding this bag up because I've got a cheat sheet on the back of this thing, figure you've got about a month to the seedling stage. If you put a seed in the ground or in a media that you're working with, if you're raising this in a greenhouse or indoors, you've got about a month from seed to seedling. And then figure you've got about 8 to 10 weeks to harvest from that point. So literally, this whole process is going to take anywhere between 12 to 15 weeks. And again, that depends on the variety. So pay attention to that varietal information on that seed packet or that label of that plant. Also, Dr. Masabny recommends to go ahead and succession plant these guys. Maybe you get a variety that produces in 70 days. You know, wait till the one plant starts producing flowers. Back up all that time, figure out when you can actually get the second set of tomatoes that you're going to be growing in the ground by the time the tomatoes you currently have in the ground are producing fruit. So just think about that. You can continue to produce tomatoes when some of these determinate or indeterminate stop producing. So I've given you information about heat tolerant varieties, a little bit of information about sowing from seed. This variety that I held up earlier with a little bit of black on its shoulders, this is a cherry tomato called Indigo Cherry Drops. And it's been hybridized to retain some of the quality. The reason these look so good, and I just want to eat one now, but I'm going to wait, so I won't tease anybody. We've just been providing them with adequate water. So water, I think of water as mother's milk, right? These plants, tomatoes, as well as other plants, they definitely need water. Tomatoes need full sunlight, 6 to 8 hours. The more you can get to them, the better off you are. I'm going to try to dislodge this camera without too much fuss. I may not be successful, so my apologies. But we're going to go over to these other gardens really quick and show you some of these plants in the ground. Since I can't figure out how to reverse the camera, I'm just going to take you over and pretend like I know what I'm doing. All right. These are some of the production beds that we have here at the community garden. Now the Imans have built this out, lovingly built this out with the assistance of other gardeners here at the community garden. They do maintain it. We do have work parties out here to help build these up. But you can see that these plants are on, first off, they're on a timer. I'm not sure if I'm showing you that right now. We have them hooked up, these beds are hooked up to an irrigation system. We got an irrigation system going. They've got a water pipe, standpipe up, and they put a timer on it so they can regulate how much water is actually put out. They've responsibly put down soaker hoses at the ground level and then mulched these plants to reduce weeds, to retain some of that moisture that's coming out. An interesting thing also, and I think it's a great idea, when they put these plants in the ground, they purposely started pinching off leaves from the bottom of the stem. One of the challenges growing tomatoes in our area, in our high humid area, is there's quite a number of fungal pathogens that can affect the plants themselves, can reduce their production, can outright kill the plant over time. And to reduce that, we try to use best methods for maintaining them. One is bottom watering, which we've done currently, so there's very little problems with that. They've removed all the leaves along the bottom of the stem to reduce the incidence of that. Fungal pathogens are modal. They most will work, well, the ones that we're aware of will be splashed with water, so we're trying to reduce that as much as possible. So I think that's absolutely fabulous. Now, most of the tomatoes, these larger ones, this is German Johnson. I'll try to put my hand here for scale. This is a large tomato, and it's not ripe yet. It's getting there. It's almost there. It's just starting to get a tiny, tiny little bit of a blush. So I think by this weekend, our guys will come in and they'll start harvesting some of these and let them ripen fully on their countertops before they take them over to the charity here. But these, you can see these plants with this many fruit. There's probably about 6 to 7 clustered along this one stem. That's putting a lot of weight on there. So you've got to prop these guys up. You know those little cages that you see, that you purchase from the hardware store or from your favorite either feed store or other store? I mean, they're nice. It's a nice gesture, but those plants are going to overpower that tiny little cage that you may be putting your tomato in. So if you're growing a larger tomato, like a beefsteak tomato, you're going to want to stake it up, right? If it's an indeterminate variety, like a cherry tomato, most of the ones that I talked about this evening, all of the heirloom tomatoes that I talked about, they're all indeterminate. You're going to need to stake them up. So we've done that here. We've taken some of this rebar staking, put that in the ground. Also, they've set up this paneling, kind of cow panel pens, straight across the garden itself to provide support. So we're trying as many methods as we can to try to get these tomatoes upright, staked upright, so that we can manage them a lot better. And there's some paste tomatoes, Paisano. We're growing Paisano as well. I'd take you over there, but I think I'm running out of time. I'm getting the head shake. Yes, we're running out of time, folks. But we do have some paste tomatoes over here. Paisano, a wonderful tomato that works well in our area and produces a wonderful fruit. It's also in full sun. I think we'd bleach out everything if I took you over there. So folks, I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening on this wonderful journey through heirloom tomatoes and a little bit more information about gardening with tomatoes. I encourage you to get out and garden. You know, there's lots of studies. There are studies, professional studies, that have indicated that gardening is very beneficial to our physical health as well as to our mental health. I know a lot of us are stressed out right now, but I highly encourage you to get out and garden. You still got time to plan for a fall garden. You can use a lot of these tomatoes that we currently have here. Start growing them out by seed. Pay attention to some of the information that I just described to you, and you can get a good, there's no reason, there is every reason that you can be successful with these varieties that we've been talking about today in a fall garden. So you haven't missed your window. You can still do a fall garden. I'm Stephen Brueggerhoff, your horticulturist with Brazoria County AgriLife Extension. Here, broadcasting from Pearland. Again, thank you very much to keep Pearland beautiful in the city of Pearland. When we do open up, come down to Angleton and check out our bees, our demonstration garden. We'll be back next month with another program. I'm going to be signing off, and remember that I can answer any questions that you have. I'll just have to get to them a little bit later. Thanks again for joining me, folks.